As Captain Chen's shuttle docked with Earth's orbital command station, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity stood at a precipice. The Conclave representatives had seemed so confident, so assured of Earth's compliance. Their technological superiority was undeniable. Their ship had traversed interstellar space with apparent ease, while humanity was still struggling to establish a permanent presence on Mars. "Captain Chen, welcome back," General Rivera greeted her as she stepped onto the station. His normally composed features were tight with tension. "The Security Council is assembled and waiting for your report." Chen nodded, following him through the station's curved corridors. "They were expecting us to be grateful for the offer," she said. "Their ambassador seemed genuinely surprised when I didn't immediately accept." "Did you get the scans?" Rivera asked, lowering his voice despite the secure environment. Chen patted the data module secured to her uniform. "Complete technical readouts of their vessel. Our systems were capturing everything while I kept them talking." The station's main conference room had been converted into an emergency command center. Representatives from Earth's major powers sat around a circular table, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays. Among them were Dr. Eleanor Matsuda, Earth's leading xenolinguist, and Colonel Zhao Wei, head of the Global Defense Initiative. "Captain, please proceed," the UN Secretary-General said as Chen took her position at the briefing podium. Chen activated the room's central display, showing a three-dimensional rendering of the Conclave vessel. The alien coalition, calling themselves the Galactic Conclave, has offered Earth Protectorate status. In exchange for technological assistance and protection, they would impose restrictions on our development and expansion. She paused, letting the implications sink in. "They've given us 48 hours to decide." "Protection from what, exactly?" Colonel Zhao asked, his eyes narrowing. "They were vague on specifics," Chen replied. When pressed, their ambassador mentioned the dangers inherent to space exploration by immature species, the implication being that we need their guidance to avoid catastrophe. Dr. Matsuda leaned forward. "Their language patterns are fascinating. There's a consistent undertone of condescension, though I believe they're unaware of it. They speak to us as adults might speak to gifted children." "What do they know about us?" asked the Russian representative. "More than they should," Chen said grimly. They referenced specific historical events, including conflicts and technological advancements from the past century. They'd been watching us for some time. The Chinese delegate frowned, and their technological capabilities. Chen gestured to the data module as a technician connected it to the briefing system. Their propulsion system appears to utilize principles similar to our theoretical work on gravitational manipulation, but centuries more advanced. Their hull materials and energy systems are beyond our current understanding. Colonel Zhao studied the scans, his military mind already analyzing potential weaknesses. And yet, they chose diplomacy rather than force. Why? "Perhaps conquest isn't their way," Dr. Matsuda suggested. "Or perhaps they see greater value in willing subjects than conquered ones." The Secretary-General stood, bringing the room to attention. "The question before us is clear. Do we accept these terms and secure immediate technological advancement at the cost of our autonomy, or do we refuse and risk isolation from the galactic community?" Captain Chen looked around the room, at the faces of humanity's leaders wrestling with the most significant decision in their species' history. "There's a third option," she said quietly. "We buy time. We learn everything we can from them while developing our own response." "And how do we do that?" someone asked. Chen's answer was simple, but would set in motion events that would reverberate throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. We let them think they've won. As High Adjudicator Vrax's ship departed Earth's orbit to begin establishing the quarantine, the alien remained confident in the ultimate outcome. Throughout the Conclave's long history, isolation had proven an effective tool against stubborn species. Cut off from the greater galactic community, most civilizations eventually came to understand the benefits of Conclave protection. Meanwhile, in the subterranean command center beneath Geneva, Captain Chen joined General Santos and the hastily assembled Pandora Task Force. The room buzzed with activity as scientists, military personnel, and intelligence analysts worked in coordinated chaos. The Conclave ships have reached Neptune's orbit, a monitoring officer reported. They're deploying the first quarantine buoys. Santos nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion, just as we expected. How long until the system is complete? Their current deployment rate suggests full quarantine within 72 hours, replied Dr. Kavita Sharma, the astrophysicist who had been analyzing the alien technology. Her eyes gleamed with excitement despite the circumstances. The buoys appear to generate an interconnected subspace field that will prevent conventional travel and communication beyond our solar system. Chen studied the holographic display showing the buoy's positioning. And our countermeasures? Dr. Sharma gestured to a young physicist working nearby. Dr. Park has made a breakthrough. The South Korean scientist looked up from his calculations, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept in days. The buoys operate on a quantum entanglement principle we theorized but never achieved. However, their implementation has a fundamental weakness. He pulled up a complex diagram on his tablet. They create a perfect barrier for anything operating in normal space-time, but we've detected microscopic fluctuations, quantum variances that occur in predictable patterns. Meaning, Santos prompted, impatient with the technical details. Meaning we can build probes small enough to slip through these fluctuations, Dr. Park explained. Not ships, not yet, but enough to gather intelligence and maintain contact with whatever lies beyond the quarantine. Chen exchanged a significant look with Santos. This was more than they had dared hope for this early in the confrontation. How quickly can you have a prototype? She asked. 2 weeks for the first test unit, Dr. Park replied confidently. Mass production would take longer, but we could have a network of probes ready within 3 months. Santos turned to the assembled team. The Conclave expects us to sit here and stew in our isolation until we beg for readmission on their terms. They don't understand what humanity does when backed into a corner. His voice rose, filling the command center. We don't break. We adapt. We overcome. He walked to a central platform where a 3-dimensional map of Earth and its facilities glowed. Effective immediately, all nations are implementing the Phoenix Protocol. Military research facilities worldwide will focus exclusively on reverse engineering and countering Conclave technology. Industrial capacity will be redirected to space manufacturing and resource extraction within our system. Chen stepped forward. Communications and intelligence will be my division's responsibility. We need to learn everything we can about the Conclave, their species composition, political structure, technological capabilities, and most importantly, their weaknesses. A representative from the European Space Agency raised her hand. What about Mars and the outer system outposts? The quarantine will isolate them from Earth as well. No, Chen corrected her. We'll maintain contact through Dr. Park's quantum probes. In fact, those outposts will become our forward observation posts. The Conclave will monitor Earth heavily, but they may pay less attention to our existing extraterrestrial facilities. As the meeting continued, detailing humanity's comprehensive response to isolation. A sense of purpose replaced the initial fear and uncertainty. The Conclave had made a critical error in their assessment of human psychology. They thought isolation would break humanity's will. Instead, it would forge humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. Outside the command center, the first snow of winter began to fall on Geneva, covering the city in white. Few of the citizens above knew yet what was happening in space, but they would soon learn that humanity was facing its greatest challenge and its greatest opportunity. 3 years into the quarantine, the Pacific Oceanic Research Platform had been transformed from a climate monitoring station into one of humanity's most critical development facilities. Beneath the waves, protected from conclave observation by kilometers of ocean, engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to decode alien technology. Dr. Mai Zhang hadn't seen the sun in months. She and her international team had volunteered for extended underwater deployment, knowing that their work could make the difference between human sovereignty and submission. Today, her persistence had finally paid dividends. "It's working," she exclaimed as the prototype paracore hummed to life. The device, barely larger than a coffee maker, generated more clean energy than a nuclear reactor, with zero radiation or waste. Around her, the team erupted in cheers and embraces. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, who had led the Materials Science Division, shook his head in wonder. "We've compressed 50 years of research into 36 months. Zhang nodded, unable to contain her smile despite the exhaustion etched on her face. And the Conclave has no idea. Their observation posts are looking for radio signals, weapons tests, and spacecraft, not what we're doing down here." She activated the secure quantum communication array, itself a reverse-engineered marvel based on the captured Conclave scans. "Central Command, this is Pacific Platform. Project Prometheus is operational. Repeat, we have successfully replicated conclave power generation technology." The reply came almost instantly, despite traveling through quantum space to the underground facility in Geneva. "Confirmed. Pacific Platform. Begin immediate distribution of schematics to all production facilities. Priority Alpha." Across Earth, similar breakthroughs were occurring with increasing frequency. In the Atacama Desert, a team had cracked the principles behind conclave faster than light communications. Beneath the Antarctic ice, materials scientists had synthesized the first samples of the crystalline alloy used in conclave ship hulls. In orbiting stations disguised as debris, engineers were testing prototype propulsion systems. Each discovery was shared instantly through the quantum network, allowing parallel development across dozens of facilities. The compartmentalization ensured that no single facility understood the full scope of human advancement, a precaution against conclave infiltration or observation. High above Earth, the conclave observation post continued its vigilant watch, increasingly puzzled by human behavior. Junior analyst Ziv had been promoted to senior analyst after his predecessor was recalled for failing to predict human responses accurately. The mining operations in their asteroid belt have increased by 300% since quarantine began. Ziv reported to Commander Nail. "But we can't determine where all the raw materials are going." Nail's tentacles rippled with dismissal, desperation. They're trying to become self-sufficient within their system. A futile gesture. Perhaps, Ziv conceded, though doubt tinged his harmonic speech. But their energy consumption patterns don't match their visible industrial output. Something doesn't align with standard models. Your predecessor was obsessed with human anomalies as well. Nell reminded him coldly. Remember where that led him. Ziv's 8 eyes blinked in sequence as he returned to his monitoring station. He didn't mention the other anomalies he'd detected, brief quantum fluctuations near the buoys that his instruments struggled to record properly. Likely just sensor artifacts, he told himself. No species could develop quantum technology so quickly, especially not without conclave guidance. Deep in the asteroid belt, inside a hollowed-out planetoid designated X-37, Captain Elara Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood in the command center of humanity's first true interstellar vessel. The ship had no official name yet, only a project designation, Pathfinder. Hull integrity at 100%, reported the engineering officer. Power systems nominal. Quantum drive spooling up for first test sequence. Chen looked around at the bridge crew, each face reflecting the same mix of tension and hope that she felt. Begin countdown. Let's see if our reverse-engineered drive works, as well as the simulations predict. As the countdown commenced, she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony. The Conclave had quarantined humanity to force compliance, but instead had given them the one thing they needed most: unified purpose. Without alien interference, Earth's nations might have continued their petty conflicts for decades. Now they worked as one, driven by the need to break free from their cosmic cage. "Quantum drive engaged," announced the pilot. The stars outside the viewport blurred as the Pathfinder took humanity's first step toward the stars, and toward a confrontation the Conclave could never have anticipated. Commander Sophia Reyes had trained for this moment for 5 years, ever since being selected for Operation Breakout. Standing in the Conclave observation post, surrounded by alien technology and atmosphere, she felt strangely calm. Her environmental suit, a marvel of human engineering, processed the methane atmosphere and maintained her body temperature despite the frigid conditions designed for conclave physiology. "Impossible," Commander Nail repeated, his translucent tentacles rippling with agitation. "How did you breach our security protocols? Our systems detected nothing." Reyes allowed herself a small smile behind her visor. "Your systems were designed to detect conclave technology or primitive human technology. What they weren't calibrated for was human technology inspired by conclave principles, but developed along entirely different paths." She gestured to her suit. "This isn't a copy of your environmental systems. It's what happens when humans understand the underlying physics and then solve the problem our way." Junior Analyst Ziv moved closer, his 8 eyes fixed on Reyes with scientific curiosity. "You've been studying us all along," he realized, "while we studied you." "Precisely," Reyes confirmed. "Those quantum fluctuations you detected and dismissed as sensor errors, those were our probes, gathering data on your observation post." Outside the observation post, human ships were systematically disabling the quarantine buoys. Each vessel moved with precision, targeting specific nodes in the network with surgical accuracy. The operation was the culmination of years of planning, a coordinated strike designed to remove the quarantine while simultaneously preventing the Conclave from triggering any fail-safe mechanisms. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Chen coordinated the larger operation from the flagship Defiance. The quantum-encrypted communication network allowed her to maintain real-time contact with all elements of the human fleet, including Commander Reyes' infiltration team. Team Epsilon reports buoys 7 through 12 are neutralized, her communications officer reported. Team Delta has secured the maintenance depot on Pluto's moon Charon. Conclave personnel contained with no casualties. Chen nodded, studying the tactical display, and the Conclave reinforcements. Long-range sensors indicate they've been dispatched from the Proxima Centauri outpost. Estimated arrival in 36 hours. "Perfect," Chen replied. That gives us time to consolidate our position. Back at the observation post, Commander Nail had recovered some of his composure. "Whatever you've accomplished here is temporary," he told Reyes. "The conclave spans thousands of star systems. Your species cannot hope to stand against such power." Commander Reyes removed her helmet entirely, revealing her face to the aliens. A calculated move designed to demonstrate human adaptability. The suit's collar extended a transparent force field that protected her head while allowing face-to-face communication. "We're not looking to stand against the conclave," she explained, her expression serious. "We're looking to change it." She activated a holographic projection from her suit's systems, displaying the network of resource extraction mechanisms hidden within the quarantine buoys. "These devices have been siphoning resources from our system for 7 years. According to your own conclave charter, Article 17, such extraction from non-member systems without consent is prohibited." Nell's colour drained to a pale grey. "How could you possibly know about the charter?" "We've had help," Reyes replied. "Not all conclave species agree with your methods." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Nell's features. He wasn't just facing human resistance, he was facing the possibility of conclave division, something the leadership had worked millennia to prevent. In the silent vacuum of space beyond the observation post, more human ships emerged from concealed positions in the Kuiper Belt. Each vessel represented a different aspect of humanity's clandestine development program. Some optimized for speed, others for defense, all incorporating technology that the Conclave had never anticipated humans mastering so quickly. The first phase of humanity's response to quarantine was complete. The containment was broken, but the true challenge was just beginning. Now they would learn whether the rest of the galaxy was ready for humanity's emergence. The modified quarantine buoy that served as the meeting chamber between Commander Reyes and Administrator Kell had once been a symbol of humanity's containment. Now, transformed by human engineers, it represented something new, a neutral ground between civilizations. Sovereign Diplomatic Administrator Kell's gelatinous form pulsed with increasing agitation as he studied the evidence Reyes had presented. The holographic displays showed irrefutable proof of systematic resource extraction from Earth's solar system. Helium-3 from Jupiter's atmosphere, rare metals from the asteroid belt, and exotic particles from Saturn's rings. These are maintenance systems, Kell attempted, his translation device struggling to convey the appropriate tone. Standard components of quarantine technology. Tesh, the crystalline scientist who had defected to help humanity, stepped forward. His faceted body refracted light in complex patterns that indicated strong emotion to those familiar with his species. "I helped design the original quarantine buoy systems, Administrator," Tesh said, his voice resonating through the chamber. The extraction mechanisms were added later, under direct orders from the inner conclave. They were never part of the original containment design. The second defector, a gaseous entity named Lonis, who had once served as a diplomat, floated closer to the barrier separating the atmospheres. "I represented 12 emerging species during their integration into the conclave. All were subjected to the same exploitation under the guise of protection. When I raised concerns, I was removed from diplomatic service and targeted for mind-wiping." Kell's colour darkened, the equivalent of a human face flushing with anger. "These are internal conclave matters. Humans have no standing to question our protocols." Commander Reyes touched a control on her wrist panel, bringing up new data. "We're not just questioning your protocols, Administrator. We're exposing them to your own member species." She magnified one display showing transmission patterns. "For the past 6 hours, This evidence has been broadcasting across all standard Conclave communication channels, using their own network. The revelation hit Kell like a physical blow. His form temporarily lost cohesion before he regained control. You've accessed the Conclave communication network. Impossible. The third defector was a communications engineer. Riaz explained calmly, "The Conclave's information security protocols haven't been updated in over 3 centuries. They were never designed to counter a species deliberately targeting them." Across Conclave space, the reaction to the human broadcast was spreading faster than sensors could contain it. Species that had long accepted their place in the hierarchy were suddenly questioning the system. Those who had been designated protectorates for generations were demanding explanations for the resource drain from their systems. In orbital stations and planetary capitals throughout Conclave territory, the carefully maintained order was facing its first serious challenge in millennia. The quarantine of humanity, meant to be a standard procedure for an emerging species, had instead triggered a cascading failure in the Conclave's political structure. Back in the meeting chamber, Kell struggled to process these developments. His species was accustomed to slow, deliberate decision-making over decades or centuries. The humans operated on time frames that seemed recklessly accelerated. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his translator conveying resignation. Commander Riaz exchanged glances with her alien allies before responding. "Reform, transparency, equal standing for all spacefaring species. An end to the exploitation model that has defined Conclave expansion for millennia." "Impossible," Kell stated flatly. "The system is too entrenched. The great species would never accept such changes." "They may not have a choice," Riaz countered, gesturing to another display showing Conclave military vessels being recalled from their standard patrol routes. "Your leadership is already scrambling to contain this situation. They're mobilizing the Second Fleet." Kell's color paled to near transparency. "The Second Fleet is only deployed in the most extreme circumstances." "Exactly," Riaz said with a grim smile. "Which is why we've been preparing for this moment for 7 years." As if on cue, her communication device signaled an incoming message from Admiral Chen. "Phase 2 initiated. All units in position." The confrontation that would reshape the galaxy was about to begin in earnest. Admiral Takamoto stood motionless on the bridge of the UES Defiance as the massive Conclave fleet approached. 7 years of preparation had led to this moment. Humanity would either earn its place among the stars or face annihilation. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," his executive officer confirmed. "Defensive systems are primed and countermeasures are standing by." Takamoto nodded. "And our allies?" "In position, but maintaining distance as planned. They can't openly support us until we prove our strategy viable." The tactical display showed the 97 Conclave warships arranged in their standard formation, a 3-dimensional chevron optimized for coordinated weapons fire. It was an intimidating sight, each vessel dwarfing the largest human ships. Lieutenant Commander Patel, the weapons officer, studied her console with focused intensity. "Sir, I'm detecting power spikes across the Conclave fleet. They're charging main weapons arrays." "Right on schedule," Takamoto remarked calmly. "Begin Operation Blackout on my mark." He paused, remembering the words of the ancient military strategist Sun Tzu. "All warfare is based on deception." Mark. Throughout the human fleet, specially designed emitters activated simultaneously. Invisible to conventional sensors, they broadcast a carefully crafted sequence of quantum signals, the digital equivalent of a master key, designed to interface with the Conclave's operating systems. On the lead conclave vessel, Fleet Commander Dres watched with satisfaction as his armada closed into optimal firing range. The humans had shown impressive adaptation, but their resistance would end here. His ship alone carried enough firepower to reduce Earth's surface to molten slag. Weapons at full charge, his weapons officer reported, awaiting your command to fire. Dres raised his primary appendage to give the order, and froze. Across his command console, warning symbols suddenly flashed. Throughout the massive ship, systems began shutting down in sequence. "What's happening?" he demanded. His chief engineer's voice came through with static interference. "Unknown infiltration of our central processors. Systems are being locked out one by one, attempting to isolate and..." The communication cut off abruptly. Around Dres, the bridge lighting dimmed as emergency power engaged. The weapons display showed all offensive systems offline. "Status of the fleet?" he asked urgently. His second-in-command checked the tactical display. All vessels reporting similar system failures. We're defenseless. Across the vast conclave fleet, the same scenario played out on 97 warships. Propulsion systems reduced to minimal functionality. Weapons completely disabled. Communication limited to emergency channels. Life support functioning, but at reduced capacity. The mighty Second Fleet, pride of the Conclave military, drifted helplessly in space. On the Defiance, Lieutenant Commander Patel's expression shifted from tense concentration to astonishment. "Sir, it worked. The countermeasures have successfully disabled all primary systems across the Conclave fleet." Admiral Takamoto allowed himself the moment of satisfaction before refocusing. "Commence Phase 2. I want communication established with the Conclave flagship immediately." As the communication officer worked, Takamoto turned to his executive officer. "How long can we maintain the shutdown?" Dr. Zhang estimates 72 hours before their systems develop immunity to our intrusion program. After that, they'll begin to restore functionality. Takamoto nodded. "More than enough time to make our point." The view screen activated, showing the bridge of the Conclave flagship. Fleet Commander Dres stood rigid, his insectoid features unreadable to human eyes, but his posture conveying unmistakable tension. "This is Admiral Kai Takamoto of the United Earth Defense Force," Takamoto stated formally. "Your fleet has been temporarily neutralized using vulnerabilities in your operating systems. Vulnerabilities your leadership never thought an inferior species would discover." Dres's mandibles clicked in agitation. "This action constitutes an act of war against the Conclave." "No," Takamoto corrected. "This action constitutes self-defense against an organization that quarantined our species and illegally harvested our resources." He leaned forward slightly. "You have 24 hours to transmit our terms to your leadership. After that time, we will begin deactivating life support systems across your fleet, one ship at a time." The strategy was clear. Humanity would not destroy the Conclave fleet. They would simply demonstrate that they could. The Grand Council chamber of the Conclave Central Authority hummed with anxious energy. Representatives from the 17 ruling species had assembled for an emergency session unlike any in recent memory. The massive crystalline dome, designed to accommodate beings of wildly different biologies, now felt suffocatingly small as the crisis unfolded. High Adjudicator Vrax stood before the assembly, his exoskeleton dulled with stress. "The humans have given us 23 hours and 17 minutes to respond to their demands. The Second Fleet remains disabled and vulnerable." The Sovereign of the Trellis Combine, a being composed of interconnected plant-like nodes, rustled with agitation. How is this possible? How could a quarantined species develop such capabilities? We underestimated them, Vrax admitted. Our initial assessment suggested they would fracture under isolation. Instead, they unified. Our models predicted they would deplete their resources, attempting to break free. Instead, they developed unprecedented efficiency. The military coordinator, a massive silicon-based entity, rumbled with deep vibrations that translated as anger. We should deploy the first fleet immediately. The humans have only disabled the second fleet. They cannot have the capacity to neutralize our entire military. Vrax's compound eyes focused on the military coordinator. The humans anticipated that response. They've transmitted proof that they've already infiltrated the operating systems of the First Fleet as well. They merely chose not to activate the shutdown protocols yet. A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. The implications were staggering. If humans could neutralize the Conclave's military with such ease, what else might they accomplish? The dissidents who aided them, hissed the security administrator, a serpentine being from the oldest conclave species. They provided critical intelligence. This is an internal security breach as much as an external threat. That may be, acknowledged Vrax, but it does not change our current situation. The humans have made their demands clear. End the protectorate system, acknowledge the autonomy of all spacefaring species, and establish a new galactic governance model based on equitable representation. The sovereign of commerce, whose crystalline form sparkled with embedded data nodes, projected a series of calculations into the shared visual space. The economic disruption would be immense. The resource extraction program from protectorate systems accounts for 37% of our economic activity. And there lies the fundamental problem, came a new voice. Elder philosopher Nim, rarely active in political matters, had risen from her cushioned platform. The ancient being, whose gas cloud body contained the accumulated wisdom of millennia, drifted to the center of the chamber. We built the conclave on principles of mutual advancement and protection. Nim said, her voice resonating directly in the minds of all present. Somewhere across the dunes, those principles became corrupted. We began to protect our position rather than our values. She expanded her gaseous form, displaying historical records from the conclave's founding era. The humans are not demanding destruction of the conclave. They are demanding its reformation, a return to its original purpose. Vrax's antennae twitched with reluctant acknowledgement. The humans have also demonstrated something unexpected. They could have destroyed our fleet once they disabled it. Many species would have, after centuries of exploitation. Instead, they offer negotiation. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the assembly. The conclave stood at a crossroads. The comfortable certainties of millennia were crumbling, challenged by a species that had been expected to submit meekly to quarantine. We have 23 hours to decide, Vrax reminded them. Do we accept reform, or do we risk everything on the assumption that humanity is bluffing? As debates erupted across the chamber, Vrax stepped away from the central podium. In his private thoughts, he had already reached his conclusion. The conclave would either evolve or it would fall, and humans would be responsible either way. The species they had dismissed as primitives had just rewritten the future of galactic civilization. Admiral Ilara Chen walked the perimeter of the assembly chamber, taking a moment of solitude before the final session began. Through the transparent dome, the binary stars of Proxima Centauri painted the landscape of humanity's first extrasolar colony in hues of amber and crimson. Quite a view, isn't it? King a familiar voice. Chen turned to find High Adjudicator Vrax approaching, his movement more measured and humble than during their first encounter 8 years ago. The first time I saw alien stars from a planetary surface, I cried, Chen admitted. Not from fear or even awe, but from the realization that we weren't alone in the darkness anymore. Vrax's compound eyes studied her with newfound respect. I never understood your species' response to quarantine. Every model, every precedent suggested you would either collapse into internal conflict or eventually submit. Instead, you transformed. How? Chen considered the question carefully. I think it's because humans have always defined ourselves by the barriers we overcome. Throughout our history, whenever someone said, "this far and no further," we took it as a challenge rather than a limit. She gestured toward the chamber where representatives from 23 species were taking their positions for the historic vote. The quarantine gave us something we had lacked, a common purpose that transcended our differences. Vrax's antennae twitched in what Chen had learned was a gesture of deep contemplation. The conclave began with similar ideals, you know. The oldest records speak of cooperation and mutual advancement. Somewhere across the millennia, protection became control and guidance became exploitation. Systems tend to calcify over time, Chen observed. Without regular challenges to their fundamental assumptions, even the noblest institutions can lose their way. A chime sounded, signaling the beginning of the final session. Chen straightened her formal uniform, the first official diplomatic attire created for humanity's representatives to the stars. "Are you ready, Transitional Administrator?" she asked, using Vrax's new title. "I find the prospect of change uncomfortable," the insectoid being admitted, "but necessary. My species has lived for stability at the cost of stagnation. Perhaps we needed the chaos that humanity represents." Together, they entered the chamber. The circular design, with no species occupying a position of physical prominence, was itself a symbol of the new order being born. Former protectorate species sat alongside their one-time protectors, equal in voice and vote for the first time. Professor Tesh, the crystalline defector who had helped humanity break free, activated the central holographic display. The final text of the Galactic Assembly Charter has been distributed to all delegations. This document will replace the Conclave Compact and establish new principles of interstellar relations. Chen took her position in the human delegation, alongside Commander Reyes, Admiral Takamoto, and Dr. Zhang. Each had played a crucial role in humanity's journey to this moment. Around them sat representatives from Earth's formerly divided nations, now united in their identity as citizens of humanity. "Before we proceed to the vote," Chen announced, "I wish to address a concern raised by several delegations. Some fear that humanity, having demonstrated such rapid advancement and tactical acumen, might seek to establish dominance in place of the former conclave hierarchy." She paused, making eye contact with representatives from species that had expressed this concern. "Let me be clear. Earth has no interest in replacing one form of galactic hegemony with another. The system we propose today ensures no single species can dominate, a protection that applies to humanity as much as anyone else." Chen activated her own display, showing historical images from Earth's past. "Our own history taught us the bitter lessons of imperialism and exploitation. We have no desire to repeat those mistakes on a galactic scale." From across the chamber, Junior Analyst Ziv, now Ambassador Ziv representing his methane-breathing species, spoke up. "But what guarantees do we have that humanity's remarkable adaptability won't lead to predominance in the future?" Chen's response was simple but profound. "The same guarantee that protects all species under this charter: mutual accountability and shared vigilance. Freedom isn't secured by declarations alone, but by the constant effort of all who value it.